Welcome back, ladies, to session 2 of our Aspire 2021 conference. We hope you've had a good break, and we're really glad that you have rejoined us. So the bands are going to lead us in another song, and then straight after that, we're going to hear from some of the Aspire team, and they're going to be sharing a little bit of their story. So enjoy.
Before here today with some of the Aspire team, and I'm sure you've really enjoyed, well, we hope that you've enjoyed our time together up to now. And isn't it been good just to sing together, oh God, the battle belongs to you. We just take comfort and confidence from that, don't we? And I really just want to tease out today perhaps a little bit of each of your stories about what God's been doing in your lives at this time. You know, social media just gives us that little bit of a snapshot, but it's good to be in the room and finding out what's going on and just give God glory of what he's been doing. So Joe, just first, tell me what you love.
Oh, Beryl, I love shoes, shopping, going out for dinner.
Brilliant. That's you all over. Kate, what do you love?
So I love Julia's Rocky Road. I love chocolate.
Oh, yes.
But I've just loved going to the beach with my kiddies and my family. I love doing that.
Oh, that's great. And Julia, what do you love?
I love baking and giving it away to family, friends and neighbours.
Oh, that's so good. And I love it when Julia gives her baking to us, because we've been really enjoying a little bit of that rocky road today. And we're thinking about stories and sharing our stories. And throughout history, people have, and often women, have depicted stories and history in the form of tapestry. And I don't know about you, but when I look at a tapestry, or I've actually even had a go at making a tapestry, that the front is always so beautiful. Well, you hope that it will be. The ones I've seen finished are really lovely, but the back is like a jumbled mess. And I think, you know, that really speaks to me sometimes of our lives, that the back's a bit of a jumbled mess and the front's a beautiful picture. And that's what God is doing in us. We feel it's a mess, but he is at work, and he's working for the good of us and for those who are called according to his purpose. And he just beautifully and intricately works in our lives when we let him have his way by his Holy Spirit. Now, I was thinking about Becca's word to us earlier, and how she shared one line really stood out to me. And she said, if they knew, I wouldn't tell. And I think today gives us an opportunity, and perhaps this time of pandemic has given us an opportunity to reflect honestly and openly about our lives and what God is doing, and perhaps stuff that we wouldn't have been vulnerable about and shared about before, we can do now in a way that's perhaps healthy, because we realize that other people are struggling with painful situations, with loss, or with other things. But we can use it as an opportunity to give God glory. So Julia, would you like to go first and just share a little bit about what God has been doing and the reality of your life in the pandemic, and how he's worked in your heart in it all?
Yeah. Well, during the pandemic, my husband and I found ourselves out of work, and the last 11 months, was quite difficult at times. Initially, there was a sense of panic, because to lose 2 salaries was devastating at first. And God spoke to us both and gave us 3 words: pray, wait, and trust. And basically, that's what we've done the last 11 months. And God has provided for us. In the natural, we shouldn't still be standing financially, but God's been amazing. He's provided for us. We've had holidays, we've had meals out, we've had at least 2 checks for £500 through the door from people that we would never have imagined. And in that time, we've tried to be fruitful as well. My husband's finished his book, and I've actually done something that I felt God say to me years ago about writing my own story, and that has just gone to the editor. So we've tried to use the time wisely, because we'll never get this time back again. But, you know, in a time where there should have been a lack, there's been a time of plenty. And you know, we totally trust God, and we know he's got so much more for us, and we're quite excited about the future, really.
That's really good, Julia. Thanks for sharing that with us. And it's just amazing how, you know, God has got this situation for you at this time, and you've just seen him come through and turn things around in a really powerful way. Katie, would you like to share a little bit about what's been going on with you and how God's been working in all of that?
Yeah, for sure. So 100%, we have really experienced the goodness of God in our children's lives. We've really seen God's blessing. As you know, we're foster carers, and so our family grew at the beginning of lockdown to looking after 10 children. So my husband living with 11 of us, there needed to be a lot of God's grace. But my kids have really loved it, and I'd say they've had some of the bestest memories. For me personally, if I'm going to be really real and honest, it's probably been one of the toughest seasons I've had to walk in being a Christian, if I'm being honest. The beginning of lockdown last year, I had actually just come home from John Smith's funeral. Some of you all know John Smith. And when I got in, I received the news that my friend, who massively impacted my life, had died of a brain tumour. And then several weeks after that, my foster daughter got sent back to prison. And that set my anxiety quite up because where she'd been in prison the year previously, she had attempted to commit suicide on several occasions, and one, she actually had to be resuscitated. I had a phone call to say she'd been resuscitated, and so I wasn't able to go to prison and visit her because of the lockdown. And then you throw church life in. I'm sure for many it's been difficult, as well as a blessing. But then at the beginning of this year, my auntie all of a sudden just dropped dead, and several weeks after that, my nan then died. And so it's been a real season of loss. It's been a real season of questioning, God, where are you? Why is so much happening like this? I'm going to be honest, I've really struggled to really pray at times and connect with God. But I know I had to make a real conscious decision. And so around April time, things just got very difficult. I'd be like walking around Lidl's and I'd just be bursting into tears. Some mornings I couldn't get out of bed, but other mornings I would just feel so numb. But I just made a real conscious decision to say, okay, God, I'm going to trust you. I don't feel like getting out of bed this morning, or I don't really understand why, but I am going to choose to trust you in this season. And I know that you are a good God. I've seen the goodness through my family and through lockdown. And so I believe that you are going to grow me. You're going to change me. You're going to do, amazing things in this season, or in the future. So it's not been easy. It's a journey. But I am trusting God, and I know that we serve an amazing God that can turn any situation around. And so, that's kind of been a bit of my story.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that with us. And I really love how you were real, and you talked about, you struggle to connect with God. And I think that that's something that I myself have struggled with. And quite often we feel that that's not something we want people to know about us, but these are the things that we go through. But yet you talked about making that decision and choosing to believe God and to trust him and him turn things around. And our God is the God who turns things around, even when we find ourselves in places that we don't expect. And Joe, I know you've got a little bit of a story to tell and how God has worked. If we'd love to hear it.
So my story is just related to my younger son, Tom, who, when lockdown hit, he was just about to do his GCSEs. And so obviously that decision was made that he'd have no exams. And I just want to share this. It's not a normal story I'd share, but I think it being vulnerable and links with Kate, trusting God for yourself and for your family, which has been massive. But for Tom, not having GCSEs was like the best thing ever, because actually what that meant was he had nothing to do and he could do his passion, which was gaming. And, if you're a 16-year-old lad, you can not get out of bed till 1, but then you can game for the next 12 hours. But the situation occurred, our family situation was that I worked for the NHS, so I was frontline staff going out to work every day. My husband was navigating his business and the challenges of that, so he was in full-time work. And Tom, therefore, was at home. And free reign to game. And we've worked really hard for many years with our children to manage the demands of social media and all those areas that are part of our lives now. And I'm not saying they're bad things by any means, but there's a discipline, isn't there, and a management of that. And one day it literally was a moment so overwhelmed and a realization that my son was gaming 12 hours a day. And actually, I felt like I'd lost a bit of control over that. And I began to panic. And genuinely, the feeling of anxiety and concern about that whole area and what's the implication for this for him? But I can't. It's out of my control. Really. What am I going to do? And I panic. And it's not. It doesn't happen very often, but I felt so vulnerable, and I began to question myself as a mum. And should I be saying, no, you can only do an hour a day, and yet there's no one there to police him and trust him? And it began to really control all my thoughts. And I remember going to church this one Sunday. So this was really within me. I'd mentioned it to Justin, my husband, but I'd not shared it with anybody. And it was just something that I felt was building in me. And I went to church, and a lovely friend came over and she said, Jo, can I have a word? And that's like, oh. And because this was all consuming me, I thought, what's coming? And I knew that Tom was gaming online with her son. And I thought, oh, what is going to happen here? And she just said to me, I just need to say to you, I just need you to thank Tom. And honestly, I was a bit like, did you say thank? And I said, what's happened? She said, well, I'm not sure whether you're aware, but there was an incident that went on in gaming, and Tom stepped up and actually stopped something that was happening and looked after and cared for all the younger guys he was gaming with. And she said, I just want to thank you for his protection over my son. And I was a bit taken aback. And I felt the Lord just prompt me and say, see, what do you really need to be all consumed with your anxiety? Are you going to cast your cares and allow me to come and bring a peace? But I didn't. I still battled with it. If you want the issue, I was thinking, right. So we had a chat with Tom, and he was like, "Oh yeah, this happened, that happened," and I thought, okay, that's okay. But I couldn't rest it. I couldn't rest it. And literally, it was a couple of nights later. We were watching the telly, and it was just like the final print of the Lord. Tom came flying down the stairs. I could hear him coming down like a thunder. He was a big lad, threw into the lounge, and Justin and I watched the telly, and he just went, stop, turn the telly off, I need to ask you a question. And I literally remember the churn, thinking, oh, it's gaming. This thing is almost controlling me more than it is controlling him. And I said, oh, what? And I remember looking across the lounge to Justin thinking, what is this going to be? And he just said, I need you to answer I need the answer to this question. How am I going to tell my friend? What's my answer? How do I explain to him that my God is the real God, is the only God? Wow. And I remember sitting on the sofa thinking, what's he just said? And I did say, over to your father for the answer. and again, I felt the Holy Spirit just minister and say, Jo, it's in my hands. Your children are in the Lord's oversight. This is okay. This is okay. It's going to be okay. And this gaming situation that I have built, that is a genuine concern. And I know I've spoken to a few people, and we've laughed, saying, yeah, lockdown opened a whole new realm for our kids to have freedom, in that whole area. But I felt him say, it's okay. Your children are safe. Your children are in my hands. Your child's well-being is under my care and under my supervision. And honestly, peace rested.
Yeah. Lovely. That's so good. We need the peace of God. Yeah. It talks about peace being a guard our hearts and our minds. And God's so good, he gives us his peace when we need it. I want to thank the three of you so much for being brave and for being vulnerable and sharing just little snapshots of your story of God working in your heart and beginning to turn things around in your lives in this time of lockdown. I just want to end by reading from Romans 8, verse 28, which is a real verse that encourages us at this time. And it says, and we know that in all things, I think when we see the word all, we see there's nothing missing, is there? God works for the good of those who love him, who've been called according to his purpose. So we thank God for what he's doing. We're just going to move on in our program next, and I trust that you enjoy this worship song that's been brought to us by Life Central Collective.
When it feels like surgery and it burns like third degree, and you wonder, what is it worth? When your inside's breaking in and you feel that ache again, and you wonder, what's giving birth? If you could let the pain of the past go of your soul, none of this is in your control. If you could only let your guard down, if you could learn to trust me somehow, I swear that I won't let you go. If you could only let go your doubts, if you could just believe in me now, I swear that I won't let you go. I won't let you go.
When your fear is currency and you feel that urgency, you want peace, but there's a war in your head. Well, maybe that's when life is born, when the facades are torn, pain gives birth to the promise ahead. Yeah, if you could let the pain of the past go in your soul, none of this is in your control. If you could only let your guard down, if you could learn to trust me somehow, I swear that I won't let you go. If you could only let go your doubts, if you could just believe in me now, I swear that I won't let you go. I won't let you go. Yeah.
I'll always be by your side. If you could learn to let your guard down,
If you could just believe in me now,
I swear that I won't
let you go.
I won't let you go.
I won't let you go.
I won't let you go.
I won't let you go.
There ain't no darkness strong enough that can tear you out from my heart.
And
There ain't no strength that's strong enough that can
let you go. Never gonna let you go.
I won't let you go.
It's my absolute pleasure to welcome our next guest this afternoon, Cham Kaur-Mann, who will be our guest speaker. She has over 25 years experience of church leadership. She is the co-director of Next Leadership. Cham is actually the first Asian female minister in the Baptist Union of Great Britain. And it's just a pleasure to have her with us this afternoon. You know, Cham has the ability to story a story, and you may be wondering what I mean by that, but I'm sure it will become very clear as she starts to speak. When I first heard her speak, she gave me a brand new perspective on a Bible passage that I thought I knew very well, and what she did was invite me into that story and make it come alive and make me feel like I was a part of it. I'm so excited about what God has laid on her heart and what she has to share with us this afternoon, and you're in for a real treat. So let's welcome Cham Kaur-Mann to the stage.
What can I say after an introduction like that? Even I was impressed when I heard what Shireen was saying. But it really is a privilege and a pleasure to be here with you at this Aspire conference. And I think I'll just make things really clear for you. I've got a bit of a confession, if you don't mind. That's where I'm starting with a confession. And it's simply to say that I love a good story. Who doesn't? And I want to share a story about a film I watched a couple of years ago. And the film was called Hidden Figures. And it's about a group of African-American women mathematicians whose lives were pretty much against all the odds. They were facing racism and sexism within the work context, within society. But you know what? These remarkable women changed the course of space history. You may already have seen the film. If you haven't, please go ahead and see it. It was inspiring, it was encouraging, it was hope-filling, but for me, it was also a painful story to hear. A box of tissues later, I eventually scraped myself off the floor, but it was a story that I needed to hear. You see, their stories had been hidden for years and almost erased from history. And I know that I'd be poorer for not hearing their story, not hearing about their contributions, their talents, their gifts. Somebody had to tell their story. And sisters, whatever your locations, wherever you are, I want to just call out to you and remind you that we all have a story to share, and we all have a responsibility to tell our God story. No more hidden figures, no more hidden lives. So let me begin with my story. Shireen's already shared a bit about my story. One of the things that I'm really sort of thrilled about is that I'm co-director of Next Leadership. And it's an organization where we are passionate about developing leaders, men and women across different spheres and sectors. Our passion is to journey with them and help them to become the best that they can be. And we do this through mentoring, coaching, designing programs and delivering them. And we work at home, on this soil, and abroad. And you're probably thinking, gosh, Cham, that story sounds so smooth, it's so slick, it sounds so easy. Well, let me just disabuse you of that, because there was a journey that I had to take. And it's been challenging. And it's taken some interesting turns. The route map of my life, of my story, was as much a surprise to me as I'm sure it was to others who were looking on. And I hope that something of my story will help you to locate me in my context. And perhaps it will also make sense of why I say what I say and I do what I do. Born into a traditional working class Sikh family in Smethwick, Birmingham, I lived on an infamous street called Marshall Street. Just Google the name Marshall Street, Smethwick, and you will find a whole raft of information. By the way, I'm also a convert from Sikhism. And I remember one day my mom telling me a story. She was reminiscing about my birth story of when my father, who worked in a factory and had to do night shifts, managed to come to the hospital a few days after I was born. And when she saw him, she recounts how she started to cry. She was overwhelmed. And you might think, oh, it was simply the fact that she was seeing her husband. She was so thrilled. She was delighted. She was pleased. But no, there were tears of sadness. Because she started the narrative of saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And my dad asked her, why are you sorry? Why are you crying? And she said to him, I failed you because I have given birth to a girl child, a daughter. I must admit, not quite the happy ending I was looking for. So imagine that's the script I grew up with in my family. You're a failure, you're not good enough, you're only a girl child, a female, second class, a mistake, a burden, afterthought. My brother was and continues to be the one considered special because he's male. The family only ever found words of criticism for me. You know, you're too dark, you're too fat, who will marry you? No expectations of me to achieve or to do well. A bit about my background. My mom, like women of her generation, is completely illiterate, but she can speak a few choice words in English when she wants to. So, you know, growing up, I had no one to teach me to read and write. Admittedly, I used to make up quite a lot of stories myself. When I couldn't understand these things called words on the page, I just made it up. And I was in a special class, and I thought a special class was because you were special. It wasn't. It's because I needed additional help, and I needed additional support. You see, education for my family was not important. Educating a female was a waste of time and resources. From their perspective, for them, life was about striving. It was a struggle, and they were just trying to make ends meet. But there were some people outside my community who'd say, Cham, you know, keep on going, keep on persevering. My family thought they were interfering so-and-so's, just busybodies, and they should mind their own business. My place of worship was the local Gurdwara. Loved it. The hospitality, the welcome, the generosity, the abundant, ghee-filled, generous food. Oh, it just takes me back. It was wonderful. However, although life was good on some levels culturally, it was also policed and limited. My role was confined, prescribed. But I'm going to flip my story now. You see, I ended up at university, which is hard to believe considering there was no one to help me to read and write. And I ended up with 3 degrees. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Cham, you thought you were going to start up a pop group. But that's not true, honestly. But that's what happened. And while I was at university, which was a miracle of itself, it's another story for another day, I had an encounter with Jesus. I had an encounter with Jesus that just turned my life around. And in fact, I have to say that since that day, God has so invested in me that he's been working on me, in me, through me, and he's been reversing those scripts. You're only a girl child, you're only a female, you're Punjabi, you're Asian, you're from the north, you're a foreigner, keep quiet, don't speak, be silent, stay in your place. You're not welcome, you don't look like us, you don't sound like us, you don't dress like us. All of these narratives had to be addressed. And that's God's job, and that's what he's been doing through all these years. So that's a bit about my story. You know, you might think it sounds a bit Bollywood-esque, but you know, hey, You do not invite an Indian on your platform if they are not permitted to share Bollywood. But I want to share another story. And I want to take you on a journey. And I want us to accompany a group of women. They're sisters, in fact. And they're not that well known. They haven't got a title. They don't have platforms. Nobody's ever heard of them. In some contexts, they don't live in a palace. But you know what? Their story, their journey, their actions changed the course of history for women in their time. And they were stronger together. And that is my theme. That's my title for my talk. Stronger together. Ladies, we are stronger together when we stand alongside each other. We're not created to be islands. When we're united, we are a movement, a force to be reckoned with. So let me introduce you to them by name, because you know what? Names matter. Their names are Mala, which meant sickness, infirmity; Noah, timid, shaky; Hogla, partridge, or a bird that cannot fly; Milcah, queen or loved one; Tirzah, beloved or favored one. Note, the names became more hope-filled as the daughters were born. Clearly, their names were very descriptive and seemed to somehow convey the mood of the parents and the context they were in. So let me begin by reading to you from Numbers 27, beginning at verse 1 to 8. One day, a petition was presented by the daughters of Zelophehad, Mala, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah. Their father, Zelophehad, was a descendant of Hepher, son of Gilead, son of Machir, son of Manasseh, son of Joseph. These women stood before Moses, Eleazar the priest, the tribal leaders, and the entire community at the entrance of the tabernacle. Our father died in the wilderness, they said. He was not among Korah's followers. Why should the name of our father disappear from his clan just because he had no sons? Give us property along with the rest of our relatives. So Moses brought their case before the Lord, and the Lord replied to Moses, the claim of the daughters of Zelophehad is legitimate. You must give them a grant of land along with their father's relatives. Assign them the property that would have been given to their father, and give the following instructions to the people of Israel. If a man dies and has no son, then give his inheritance to his daughters. These 5 sisters were located on the margins of society. Their lives were effectively hidden. Their stories were hidden. However, neither location nor their circumstances could hold them back. And this day, I want to offer you 7 keys from their stories that I hope and I pray and I believe will help to unlock your own stories. And each begins with the letter C, just to make it easy. First C, context. Earlier in Numbers 26, we're informed Zelophehad had 5 daughters but no sons. We pick up the scene in Numbers 27 as the 5 daughters are named. They may have carried their father's name and lineage, but that was just about it, because they were not in line to inherit anything. Just try and imagine what they felt like. Try and step into their shoes. Step into their situation and hear the news that Moses wanted to carry out a census for each family under each clan and tribe, and of course, the males to inherit. Many would be excited. Others in the community would have been hopeful, and rightly so, because they knew that they were in line for an inheritance. But what about these 5 sisters? And no doubt others like them amongst those gathered around. Your heart begins to sink. What's going to happen to us? What about my inheritance, my land, my plot? But there's no son, there's no male to carry on the family name, to receive the inheritance. Who will speak up or advocate for us? And we all know that in biblical law, women were treated as property. No rights from birth to death, no voice. You existed to give birth to children, preferably males, to look after your husband. You weren't entitled to your father's inheritance. It went to your brothers. You were entitled to a dowry, depending on your father's wealth. Once married, you were part of another family, and now their responsibility. This was their context. Land mattered to the family, providing economic security. Let's face it, and I'm just going to call it out for what it is. The promised land didn't look promising to Zelophehad's daughters. Their future was not bright. The implications were dire for the daughters on entering the land without rights. The alternative options, as females, as single women, they were teenagers. They were orphans. They'd be left poor, destitute, homeless, maybe end up as prostitutes with no means of inheritance or dowries or income. And perhaps for some of us from similar cultural context and heritage, this narrative feels all too familiar. That was their context. Now let's move on to the second C, common concern. What I'm really struck by when I look at these sisters is that they don't grumble. They don't set up an equivalent of a WhatsApp group and have a pity party or do Facebook, or is that for people of a certain age? They don't diss Moses or go on Twitter and say, Moses is mad, bad, sad. Nor do they say, poor me, it's all about me, all my awful circumstances, I'm helpless, hoping someone will rescue me. They don't blame their parents, their relations, or their culture. However, neither do they stay silent. Neither do they accept the law as the law of the land and quietly comply. We might have expected these sisters in the Israelite camp to stay close to their tents, within their tribe, in the predetermined, allocated place. We might have expected these sisters to stay out of sight, not to stray away from the family boundary, but they do something extraordinary. After all five share a common concern. They step out of the security of their comfort zone, their assigned place, from the destiny that had been imposed on them. And this, let me assure you, is no small act. Their story took a turn. Stronger together, they take a step. Remember Numbers 27, 1-2. One day a petition was presented by who? Yes, the daughters of Zelophehad. These women stood before Moses, Eleazar the priest, the tribal leaders, and the entire community at the entrance of the tabernacle. Picture the scene, why don't you? The Israelite camp is formed of tribes. Each tribe has a determined place. The tabernacle, it's in the middle. And right in the middle stands the leadership. All of them, by the way, men. Moses, the priest, Eleazar, and the tribal leaders of the entire community are standing there. Just imagine 5 of you. You're with them. You are walking towards the center because you've been located on the margins. Everybody is watching you. Every step you take, every move you make. I know it sounds like a song, but it's not meant to be. Against all the cultural precedences, the 5 sisters step away from the tent, the tribe, the assigned places, and step forward. And I bet you could have heard a pin drop. You would have heard the sharp intake of breath and someone calling out, no, in slow-mo. Eyes popping, fingers pointing. People can't move. They are just watching you in disbelief, too shocked at the scene. And then you look at Moses' face, and he's equally shocked, as are the other leaders, the male leaders around him. He must have been overwhelmed. This had never, ever happened before. 5 strong, courageous sisters doing the walk, walking towards the leaders. It was unprecedented. Stronger together. But how intimidating it would have been for the sisters. Huge. But they shared a common concern. They hadn't been summoned. They rose. They went forward. and they decisively took a move towards the place that was high officials, men-only zone, to the place of holiness, authority, to a place where women had no authority or voice to be there. But you know what? It doesn't stop there. Not only do they take a step, but they also do something about it. They start speaking up. And this is what they say. And just listen to the tone and the texture and what they are saying. Numbers 27, 3-4. Our father died in the wilderness. He was not among Korah's followers who rebelled against the Lord. He died because of his own sin, but he had no sons. Why should the name of our father disappear from the clan just because he had no sons? Give us property along with the rest of our relatives. Couple of things to note. These sisters knew their law and they knew their history and they were prepared. They used the fact that their father was not involved in Korah's rebellion as evidence to support his and their claim. They knew the importance of the continuity of family name, the connection to the community and the nation. They relied on the inheritance of the land, and they realized that the current law was inadequate because it didn't take into account the unusual circumstances of a man without sons. After all, it wasn't their fault they had no brother or male heir, but they possessed the understanding to recognize this omission. And without any hesitation, they point to the unjust nature of the situation. Boom, as they say. What's your common concern? What has God put on your heart? What is that niggle that just won't leave you? What are you being drawn towards? What is God asking you to stand up for, speak out for, stand alongside, be an ally, be a sponsor for? What's your stretch? Up until this point, no one had ever stood up in this way. But I have to throw in another song here. These sisters are doing it for themselves. And I won't sing because I know the worship group will be horrified. We move from the context to the common concern to the third C, courage. The Israelite culture was embedded with rules that excluded women. Nevertheless, the sisters courageously and collectively challenged the status quo and the injustice of the property law. And they stood up for women's rights. Stepping out for God always requires courage, especially when no one else has done it before. That's called pioneering. And I know there are pioneers amongst us. Stepping up, speaking out when the resources aren't lined up, or when yours is the only voice, or you're the only minority in the group. We have to draw on those deep wells of courage. Do your research, do your homework, prepare yourself, and step out. Step out for the cause that God has laid on your heart. C's 4 and 5, collaborate and cooperate. The sisters also furthered their cause through strategically engaging 2 more C's, collaboration, cooperation. And they couldn't have done this without those 2 keys in their lives. They chose to cooperate and collaborate as sisters, but also engaged Moses. You see, Moses was presented with a left fielder. He'd never come across anything like this. And you know what I love about Moses at this moment was that he didn't try to shut them down. He didn't dismiss them. Oh, they're only women. You know, they're only those over there who should stay out of sight. He took them very, very seriously. In fact, the case was so serious, and he very openly reveals his own inability to assess the claims of these sisters. Good leadership. We're not all knowing, you know. He said and spoke up about what he didn't know. He took the best course of action. He went straight to God. And God, without any hesitation, supports the sister's case. Hallelujah. Come on. And even by introducing a new law that gave a security to women at that time. The achievement of Zelophehad's daughters was landmark. It was a landmark moment in women's rights up until now, although later we do know that this ruling created other challenges for marrying outside the tribe. A key to the sisters' success is their clarity of focus, their full awareness of God's laws and people's history and story. And of course, Moses did a remarkable thing there by being a sponsor and an advocate for them. We need more of them. The sisters grew up in a particular context. They shared a common concern. They were courageous by challenging the status quo. They chose collaboration and cooperation as a team of sisters and engaged with Moses and tried to bring about justice for women's rights and inheritance. What I love about these sisters is that they lent into the gift that actually most of us as women naturally excel at, of collaboration and cooperation, and not competition. That's my 6C. They could have gone down the route of competition. They could have had a power struggle as sisters, but they deferred to each other because they weren't competing against each other. They were focused on the bigger picture. They needed to preserve their energy, knowing that they were what? Stronger together in unity. They understood the gift that each brought and so deferred to those with the appropriate skill. Harnessing this gift and the power that lies within each one of us is indeed a gift. It really is a gift and a much needed skill. So I just encourage you, let's strengthen that. But I also want to just say as it is, let's remember that we're not in competition with each other. We're not on opposite sides. It's not you over there and me over here. We are united, stronger together, because we are together, serving God and following his generous invitation. We're always stronger together when we collaborate and cooperate, when we support each other's projects and ventures and enterprises, when we promote learning and development in each other, when we invest in each other. Let's speak good about the other. Let's promote the other. Let's bless and bless and bless some more, because it's too easy. It is too easy to do the opposite and bring each other down. Anyone can do that. But that's not our remit. And if anything, I would say lean into promoting greater diversity. Greater diversity of thinking, perspective, background, culture, heritage, generations around our tables. Because let me tell you, when we have that level of diversity, something quite kingdom-like happens. There's a particular grace and anointing that just infuses those atmospheres in quite a remarkable way. Well, it's God's heart, isn't it? It's God's heart. And finally, you'll be thinking, crikey, she's going on a bit. Finally, 7th C. These sisters were change makers, not only in changing their own circumstances, but also for changing the course of history, or her story, for women and women's rights. The story of these sisters, probably teenagers, serves as a reminder to us that if there are people amongst us in your group who might feel that actually my destiny is fixed, my culture has predetermined my next steps, or even that God has abandoned me, I want to encourage you. I want to remind you that your story has only just begun. And I feel that you need to rewrite your story from God's perspective. There's so much more to come, so I just want to encourage you, grab life with your own hands. Move from the place that others may have prescribed to you, or that you have decided to remain in because you feel immobilized by the disappointment, the fear, the discouragement that has been overwhelming. And I want to ask you to take a step today in faith. Revisit your story and rewrite your story. And then as you go forward, remember your context, your common concern. Be courageous, collaborate and cooperate. Remembering that there is no competition. There is no competition. we're all on level ground. And focus, for God's sake, for the kingdom's sake, on being a change maker, a catalyst, leaving a legacy that is transformative and making a difference to the lives of others around you. Whatever your location, whether you're in the playground, whether you're in the school, the college, the university, whether you are in the laundrette, whether you're working in Aldi, whether you're in a boardroom, make a difference. You are on your front line. The daughters of Zelophehad, they remind us once again, we're always stronger when we're together. You see, theirs is a story to be heard, and yours is a story to tell. I'm going to invite the worship group to just lead us as they feel the Spirit leads.
for bringing that word to us this afternoon, and Becca this morning. We've just had such a great morning. We want to thank the worship team. You guys have been amazing, and thank everybody behind the scenes. And we just hope that we can be together again next year in person. But we want to thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you've loved it as much as we've loved it.
Oh, yes, it's been such a great time. And unfortunately, now it's just time to say goodbye. But I just want to leave us with the words of Cham when she said, "Your story isn't over. Go write your story." So goodbye, everyone, and thank you so much for joining with us today.